All right, we started. ZK everyone. Thanks for listening in again this week. I'm joined by James from Camp Network and Murat from Primev. Murat, you guys might know because we actually have a partnership with them and I've been talking a bit with them about pre-confirmations. James, I've never met before as well. So maybe we kick it off with some brief introductions and you guys can introduce what your projects do and then we'll get started. James, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to kick off. My name is James. I'm one of the co-founders of Camp. In terms of background, I graduated from Berkeley, spent a few years in TradFi, Goldman Sachs, really spending my time helping tech and consumer companies think about, going public. And after Goldman, had the chance to work at Figma in their strategy and finance team, helping scale the self-serve and enterprise go-to-market. Over the last few years, just been really excited about the technology of blockchain, trying to merge sort of innovative technology with the background that I had around advising and working at some of the most disruptive tech companies. How can we find use cases of blockchain that can permeate beyond the Web3 isolated ecosystem and really kind of branch into like the broader retail? How can we think about the 3 to 5 year future, not just the next 2 or 3 months? And how can we think about onboarding not only mass retail, but devs and IP holders as well? What makes Camp really exciting is looking at the broader macro environment in which we're in around AI. Just looking at the last few months, AI has grown at a scale, I think, faster than anyone could have ever imagined. Being able to discern what is an original content versus what's a derivative, that line continues to get blurred over the weeks. Google VO3 was a crazy sort of it blew up my social media, and it was just crazy to see the quality of AI over the last few months and few years. We saw, if we extrapolate the growth of AI, especially around creativity, it sort of paints a pretty scary environment for all things creativity and intellectual property. And the reason why I say that is over the next few years, we can expect over 95% of content to be generated by AI. Without the guardrails to understand what's an original content, what is a derivative, if we don't have the infrastructure to really track which AI models are training on what IP content, and if that happens to reward these IP contributors, we can see a world in which AI sort of threatens all creativity. We saw this kind of materialize over the last few months in kind of two specific examples. One is in Studio Ghibli and OpenAI, where we saw their models train on their content. And while you can argue that it was good for building mindshare and presence, at the end of the day, the owner of the IP was not compensated or monetized for their contributions to this training, which led to tremendous growth for OpenAI. And so, that was sort of like one of the first examples that really stood out to a lot of retail of like, wow, like great IP, but no sort of fair compensation. And then in more recent weeks, we've seen sort of the legal aspect of this come into play, where it's not just, hey, you trained on my IP, you didn't give me money. I wish you had done it and we'll move on, right? I think we saw some cases with Stability AI and Getty Images, other IP houses sort of taking their stands from a legal perspective and saying, hey, you guys are unfairly training on my IP and my repository of data. This is unique to me. And you're training your models on this data and you're not compensating me. So I'm seeing some legal kind of lashback around this. Has also been sort of a realization that this is not just people talking about this problem and moving on. This is something that's going to cost businesses real dollars, real resources. And so we extrapolate what we've seen in the last 6 months over the next few years, paired with the extremely fast and rapid development of AI, I think it shows that without the proper infrastructure to protect creativity, AI is just going to really destroy the whole creative market. So that's the broader context in which why we're really excited to be building Camp. We're a layer one blockchain to build infrastructure such that AI systems can be collaborative with IP and not threatening IP. We believe that user-owned IP is going to create tons of value moving forward, whether it's across PvP or it's across AI native economies, where you can onboard IP through applications on Camp. We have over 60 native teams building across entertainment, consumer, IP, etc. And these applications are onboarding IP, and we can really create the next generation of value within AI agents by having this repository of rights clear user data and creating the infrastructure for autonomous systems to work collaboratively and train and pass back monetization to any co-contributor of those models. So we see a really exciting future where we see kind of positive sum environments between AI and IP.
That's super interesting. We'll dive into that a bit more later. Murat, maybe give a quick rundown of pre-confirmations and that whole space.
Yeah, I've been in the space for a very long time. I was, just on Reddit when the Bitcoin white paper dropped, so kind of a day oneer in that sense. And speed of blockchain user experience was always a factor for me, and that actually catalyzed my initial switch from Bitcoin to Ethereum. I was sending money abroad, and I was like, hey, it's just easier when I do it on Ethereum, right? But over time, as I was building infrastructure for Ethereum, I have a long background of building Ethereum apps and infra. Some of my products are used across, I think at some point it was 11 out of the top 15 DeFi protocols. But the core kind of thing that we were getting when I was at Block Native and leading product was that folks were asking us guarantees when they sent us transactions, as we ran a block builder on Ethereum at the time. And block building is decentralized somewhat, so then you cannot give a guarantee at a network level when you're a block builder. So this idea came out, well, what if we had a network that the network of block builders could give these guarantees? And that's kind of how we founded Mev Commit, which is the live network today. It's making about 1% of Ethereum blocks right now fast, as we call it. So about 100 millisecond or so transaction experience on those blocks. So it's pretty exciting. But the core primitive that it enables is this crypto economic finality, right? So it abstracts the blockchain's speed or guarantees or finality from an economic perspective. And because these entities have some stake on our network, basically once they give you this cryptographic commitment in real time, you're good to go. You can take other action in your dApp. You can update your dApp. You can, execute another trade on another domain because that transaction is going to happen, or in case if it doesn't, you get your money back. So this is a very kind of interesting primitive. Now we've wrapped it around pre-confirmations and are doing this on Ethereum, but really it's also a core primitive for interoperability, because now if you have this economic finality on one domain, then you can quickly interoperate with another domain. And that's also the basis of how we've been working together with Union. So really excited to kind of dive into some of these, but also what James said, because it's particularly relevant, with everything going on in the AI area as well.
Yeah, mine immediately goes, James kind of mentioned like AI is paying for the IP they're using. Is that a world where we're paying creators when the AI is being trained? So is it potentially a world where we're paying creators when the IP is being used in the response? Because I imagine the second one requires like way more scalable infrastructure, right? If during inference, you're going to figure out where did they obtain this information from, who needs to be like receive a micro reimbursement right now. I'm not sure if like blockchain itself is capable yet. I don't think it's capable yet of supporting that level of transfers, but it's something we obviously want to work towards.
Yeah, no, that's super fair. I mean, for us, we were, in order to really build this future, to enable sort of the seamless collaboration between AI and IP, we have to build an L1 so we can kind of customize all this down to the execution layer. We're also building sort of side camp architecture to enable top dApps to have their own block space. And so ultimately, we believe that having like a super customized execution layer where we can not only prioritize IP transactions, but we can also make royalties like gas lists. Imagine a future where you put your voice through an app on blockchain, someone creates a song using that voice, someone puts that song in a game, someone licenses that game, there's a derivative tree. And having to have smart contracts do compute every time royalties, you earn $1 at the kind of child, and you pass it through the parent tree. Being able to incur computation as well as gas is essentially going to be really difficult if you don't have the ability to make those things gasless, to prioritize IP transactions, right? We don't have to compete if we settle on a different L1 to compete with other DeFi apps on MEV and block space, for example. And so we believe that really that's why we sort of started building the L1 is to really enable that future that's rooted in provenance, which is just another word for ownership. We believe by establishing provenance through blockchain, by saying who owns what, whether it's another user licensing that IP or whether you're building an agent that leverages someone's IP, creates a new IP that tokenizes it and someone uses that IP, you can see that derivative tree all rooted in provenance to ensure that every contributor, whether AI agent or another user, can all be fairly compensated and have attribution for their contributions to the work.
Is this a world where we potentially see like a private ZK rollup so that parties that use AI privately could perhaps do like a whole bunch of inference and then like a week later do a mass settlement on camp to show like we did use this, but we kind of want to hide away how we use it. We just want to fairly like pay back the creators. Is that something?
100%. I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, the concept of privacy is imperative as we think about scaling this to like, how do we become the next $5-10 billion project? How do we start handling data that's not only like a music sample or like a book that I publish, right? How do we start to handle massive amounts of private data, whether it's like healthcare data, whether it's government data? There's tons of use cases around sort of building agents around these massive data repositories. Once we start to tap into that market and uphold privacy on both sides, and I think we can truly be sort of like the de facto globally recognized IP registry, rights clear data marketplace. Our goal is not to just be a siloed L1 that doesn't communicate with any other chain. Our goal is to be a global standard in which not only Web3 chains and doing like a multi-chain strategy, but I think ultimately having sort of compatibility across Web2 legal systems, across these sort of larger entities and education, healthcare, government, et cetera, and really kind of being that global standard for all things rights cleared data marketplace for IP training or AI training rather.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So we kind of have to see like the long-term future of camp being maybe camp being connected to private public chains altogether. A lot of communication going on. I think you need that to scale, to be honest. And with builders doing like I won't say private chains, but purposefully built chains, right? These stable chains right now, I think it's only going to expand, and we're going to see more chains being used across various use cases. But I kind of agree with you that I think a lot of the execution is going to be AI driven. And so this world where indeed like AI is manage their own internal economy is like a perfect fit. Is that something where you guys have like taken a look at? And I know like it's still a bit nascent in like the pure Web3 space. They could like Eliza and stuff and other on-chain agents, but I don't think they're like transacting that much on-chain yet. You guys kind of looked at the use case of can indeed like your network support, I don't know, cross-chain payments in one form or another, or can you maybe use the committee for other use cases except for the block building pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like tons of use cases here. Like we saw with, especially on the agent side, OpenAI launched their own ChatGPT agent, and it's just powerful, right? In terms of how can you outsource sort of your day-to-day tasks to like an intelligent system that can plug into different sources of data and then can act on your behalf. This is sort of the future that we saw a few months ago. Our goal is to not just be the largest rights clear data marketplace, but to create sort of, or rather unlock that agentic layer on top where anyone can sort of create AI agents really seamlessly on top of all this user-owned IP. We see a future where autonomous agents are going to act on behalf of users. It's almost creating a new target audience of AI agents, and being able to have access to sort of proprietary, unique data will kind of create unique specialization in these agents. Because whatever is online has already been scraped today. It's going to be hard for any net new agent to create differentiation on a similar foundation as the ChatGPTs of the world, right? So how can you think about the next generation of value creation? We kind of see that on user-owned IP, rights clear data, building a global standard across multi-chain and Web2 processes as well, and unlocking sort of that really kind of autonomous future around user-owned IP.
Makes sense. Go ahead, Murat.
James, curious. There was a big AI meeting or something with President Trump last week. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, but it was interesting to me because I was along the same thought path where okay, there's a bunch of IP and there's models being trained on it, and they should compensate accordingly based on the weights and the amount that they trained on. However, he made the statement that he wants to kind of skip over this in some sense and have basically these models be able to go haywire in a sense. And he gave this example of, hey, look, if I read a book somewhere, and then go about my day, I don't compensate the book writer. I haven't made up my mind about how I feel about this. On the one hand, you have this, yes, you want innovation to continue as fast as possible, particularly when it's this kind of global AI race. But on the other hand, you have, intellectual property, and, we do care about creators, especially for their work. Curious if you have any thoughts on how that kind of comes together with the work that you guys are doing on, and maybe it's not definite yet, and in the future will shape it. But I thought that was a very interesting area that was brought up.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, he was like criticizing just sort of like the copyright rules, like how can you micromanage every licensing of idea, right? Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in sort of processes and legal stuff. I would have shared maybe a similar sentiment, or maybe have kind of seen more from his side, like a few months ago. Like after Studio Ghibli, I was very interested in that sort of use case, right? Studio Ghibli is a relatively well-known IP. OpenAI trained their models without compensation, had some really cool outputs where it actually drove user adoption for OpenAI. And Studio Ghibli got some mind share. And sure, maybe it's like a win-win. It's not perfect, but it did kind of solve some KPIs on both sides. But I think that what I mentioned earlier is when you start to see sort of, when you talk to some AI folks, they're like, we're not going to adopt we're not going to adhere to all these like stringent rules unless someone tells me I have to, right? Like, why am I going to stunt innovation in a way to like, make sure I'm coloring within the box and not going outside it. But I think what the kind of more recent lawsuits showed us is around, these large IP houses are realizing that the data that they sit on is really, really powerful. Obviously, you can argue there's some edge cases. Yes, I can see a picture online, I can screenshot, I can put it as my wallpaper, say it's my own, and sure, we can't protect that, at least in the near term. But what we're trying to build is a future in which you can start to feel where there's infrastructure to enable sort of protection, and not only protection, but really the compounding growth of IP using AI. We've launched some pretty compelling campaigns on Camp so far using our ecosystem partners. We've had over 1.5 million sort of remixed IP on Camp, and that's been really powerful to see people being able to establish provenance in IP. So we've been able to work with some pretty amazing creators. We launched a campaign with Minto about a week ago. Minto is one of Japan's largest IPs in the world. They have $5 billion of their GIFs and stickers. Their view of the world is that we want to establish sort of ownership and provenance because that creates the rails for it to really be multiplayer. If I'm the IP creator side, obviously there's value in provenance. If I'm an AI, on the AI side, I think you have to start to respect IP creativity because of the lawsuits that are happening in like real time. And I think we'll continue to see more and more lawsuits come up as AI continues sort of going on this like rampant journey. It's no longer just a good to have. It's like a must have in terms of like these processes in place. And so I think the world will continue to converge as there's like more real dollars, more real lawsuits, real issues stemming from the unfair training of AI and IP. And I think there's a world in which there's sort of like a balance between the two. You can't completely stunt it. You can't completely restrict it. But again, I think at Camp, we're really just focused on how we can find that right balance of growing creativity, utilizing blockchain as really the only solution to enable that future, and working with kind of IP as well as ecosystem partners on Camp to build for that.
That's really cool. I mean, there seems to be another angle here where it gives verifiability to the AI creator also. Like, what did I use for my training data? I didn't use your artwork. Actually, it's this art that I used, and you can kind of trace that on the chain, right? There was this famous, OpenAI Scarlett Johansson voice kind of thing where, he tried to get Scarlett Johansson to do it, but she said no, apparently. So then there's this other voice that's like almost exactly the same. And there's some plausible deniability there, but, everybody knows what's going on. So I think it does make the entire kind of transaction for both parties or multi-parties more verifiable and transparent. So I think that there's a lot of power in that as well.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
My DeFi brain is immediately thinking, if you had the ability to like lease IP for a short amount of time, right? Obtain the royalties, let's say, for the next 3 days from a certain IP item. I could go on chain, and if I have a hunch that people will create a lot of memes about a certain topic because it's going to be in the news, I could lease IP related to that topic. And as then AIs start producing like meme content because users keep like prompting for items related to that, I could effectively make money on that. So you can almost create like this amazing secondary market where if you kind of know what will be at the top of mind share for various reasons, right? Maybe football cup or something is happening, right? So, you know, the whole world will be talking about that. You could effectively like trade on that and hedge potentially as well. Is that something that
Yeah,
you
it's
guys
a,
explore? Or?
yeah, really interesting point that you bring up. I mean, what we've been focusing on at camp, I mean, one of the many pillars, there's like AI co-creation using, kind of growing IP. I think one of the interesting pillars is how can we make IP more liquid, right? If I have an idea, if I see a derivative, or if I see an idea, how can I leverage AI to create a derivative? In this example, if there's some IP that you have, how can I leverage these tools to like create my own derivative of the IP that's rooted in provenance? How can I monetize on that IP, maybe around like a certain event, creating the secondary marketplace? How can you get that IP distributed to like e-commerce stores within minutes, as opposed to like having to deal with the entire logistics process of setting that up? How can you trade sort of attention coins on different memes that are trending in the market? Imagine like a TikTok for creators that's purely just driven by like AI content. Everything on the app is AI. There's a marketplace for all this amazing IP. You can select the IP, give a % royalty, leverage these AI tools to create these short form videos, really fun content. Can you tie creator tokens to those different the creators or the derivatives, and can you start to trade on like the attention of it? Those are sort of like really interesting use cases around this sort of attention economy, making IP more liquid use case that we're really excited about.
Yeah, extremely interesting. Does this model though kind of fall apart if like open source models make like massive leaps, or perhaps like we have like a big breakthrough in how we train AI, and suddenly I could actually train like a Claude 4 level model on my own MacBook, and me being like adversarial, right? Like just not giving a shit at all, just not training my AI to abide by these IP laws. Because I think we're going to indeed like get a bit of a, I would say like a war between nations, but indeed, like Murat said, like not having any rules at all makes you go faster, obviously, right? Like we've laws for a reason to like keep things fair, but if you're not bound by any IP rules, you can just use whatever you want to train your AI, you will inevitably train a better AI than your competitors, or at least a cheaper one. And how do you see this? Like, what do you think is going to happen in the space? Are you guys like a danger,
Yep.
or do you?
No, I think the inflection point between us being camp where it is today and becoming, $100 billion project is creating sort of that infrastructure for all sort of AI systems to abide by. I think the impending lawsuits that have been happening kind of showcase real dollars, real tension. It's not just a slap on the wrist, like, oh, you trained on my IP, don't do it again. There's like real sort of things behind this. So real momentum rather. So yeah, we're excited to continue converging what we see in the Web3 blockchain AI IP space and sort of every agent model out there, right? Because instead of having to deal with lawsuits and worry about, is my model training on content fairly, and having to deal with repercussions of that later, can you simply 1 or 2 clicks establish that provenance through camp, and sort of fairly, what is the downside of giving, small royalties, or saying, hey, I can license your content, and not having to worry about it, versus building wildly and then facing a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit and things like that. So again, we just think that in order for this to be really the biggest opportunity that we see it to be, is really compatibility and recognition across not only Web3 but Web2 systems, including AI.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, where protocols like Union and MEC may come into play, right? Because you're having to deal with so many different domains, but that's Web 2 or Web 3. You need these instant economic finality. You need interoperability. So I think this type of infrastructure is often viewed as kind of Web 3 only. But then you have interesting initiatives like the one that you guys are doing, And then that seems to be the kind of the bridging gap between what's going on in the Web3 world in terms of the infrastructure and this kind of mid-layer infrastructure that can serve both, that likely interoperates and uses the former one as well. So, instant economic finality is kind of what we specialize on right now. And obviously, like what we hear from AI developers is that they have some agents that trade or something, and then they take a bunch of actions, and then they get to the step where the transaction has to complete on Ethereum or something like that, and then the agent's basically like spinning there, right? It's just waiting until something happens. Sometimes it breaks because it can't handle it well. And similarly, I can imagine for interoperability, right? Nobody wants to wait 15 minutes for the bridge. You don't want the AI to be spinning for that long. So in a world where there's some IP over here and you want to transact over there, or you have some tokens over there, all of these things to kind of work seamlessly, I think it means that all three parts of these infrastructures work together to some degree.
Yeah, I think especially for me at least, like I really like interop, so like building it, like the tech, like the algorithms, they speak to me. But I always like the idea of permissionlessly expanding, right? So, like not needing to go to a certain party and being connected, but indeed like observing Camp or Ethereum or any Ethereum L2 and seeing there's something interesting going on. Let me hook in on that, right? My counterparty doesn't need to know what chain I'm on or where I'm coming from. Still everything is just structured purely by code, and that kind of allows for what I feel like what makes crypto great, which is like hockey stick type expansion, where all of a sudden you see a whole ecosystem bootstrap itself. Another thing that I'm immediately thinking where there's lots of overlap is obviously like the ZK space itself. I remember this was like, I feel like cooler like a year and a half ago when everyone was talking about like ZK AI, like can you like train a model without like actually providing your data. I think that never really took off because for me, at least from like how computationally expensive like training is, it didn't make sense for me to do that with ZK tech. I think you'd be like training for the next like lifetime of the universe or whatever, some ridiculous number before you have your first model done. But I'm guessing maybe indeed like showing provenance using ZK is something that's interesting, because I kind of assume, James, that you guys like create this complex graph of like where IP is coming from, like which IP is maybe a derivative of other IP, etc. So I can imagine that like on-chain tracing down this graph could be relatively expensive to do, especially for micropayments. Or if you don't want to show someone that which IP you used, only that you properly paid for the IP, right? Like generate a proof that indeed you abided by the rules. Are those things that you think will be important for this like AI-driven industry, or do you think that's maybe too much sci-fi?
Yeah, my view is that provenance on chain is really the solution to unlock the next generation of AI plus IP. Right, there's a world and those two need to work together. And I think that if you can understand what's the source of content, who are the contributors, what is being tokenized, what is licensable, seeing all those attribution and licensing rights that are transparent as well. I think it really paints an exciting future where those two things can grow together. AI should be able to grow rapidly. It's not is AI going to grow rapidly with IP or without IP? I think it should grow with IP. We're establishing the infra for that to be a reality.
There may be a bit of a spicer take for you, Murat, but see here that like Camp and James decided to build like an L1 instead of an Ethereum L2, perhaps. Do you see that maybe as like something that's missing in like the Ethereum provided like solutions to builders right now? The idea that like is it something that hurts you, where you think like shit, we need to improve like the infrastructure around Ethereum to be able to accommodate parties like Camp to choose to like build directly on Ethereum? How do you see that play out?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a huge L2s are like the end it be it all kind of proponent. I do think like L1s like the ones James is building have to gain more. They have more to gain basically when there's a very strong other L1 ecosystem, right? When there's a lot of activity on Solana, when there's a large stable coin base and TVL that he can access on Ethereum, it makes the value proposition of other L1s actually stronger, where, okay, I'm going to use this L1 for my IP. Well, I'm going to get some stable coins from Ethereum, and maybe there's a bunch of users or apps on Solana or Hyperliquid or something like that are going to come and do that. So I think of it from a blockchain ecosystem perspective. I don't think of it as like this EVM L1 L2 relationship. And L2s are great in many ways, but they also have their own problems. I mean, they're very centralizing right now, so it's like this kind of corporate takeover of Ethereum happening a little bit, which I do think will be solved in the meantime. But I mean, our chain is kind of an L1.5 in that sense, where it's on Ethereum, but it's not directly inheriting security in that sense, or writing blobs, because it has some particular needs. And I do think it's important to be able to build other L1s that are very highly specializing, and that the overall ecosystem grows. And when I think of how Ethereum came about, when Bitcoin was the main thing, and it still sort of is, that's how I think about it. Like, I don't think of Ethereum as parasitic or competing with the Bitcoin vision. But we see Ethereum grow because Bitcoin is growing, and vice versa. So I do think that a world where multiple L1s that are specializing in their own ways or bring something new to the table grow the pie rather than eat into each other's slices. So I'm actually very excited to hear about an L1 that is specializing on this kind of ethical AI onboarding, for lack of a better terminology. And I do think that's additive to both the EVM and other L1 ecosystems.
I'm, by the way, personally of the opinion that like L1s and L2s are practically the same. It's all state machines and kind of blockchains in the end, and hopefully something that's like provable and censorship resistant, and then decentralized even better. Although over time I've grown to believe that censorship resistant and like verifiable is like more important than fully decentralized, just because of how we have to interplay with the regulatory landscape nowadays, right? There's certain applications that just are not possible if you run on a truly decentralized network. The US government will just stop you, but we can definitely bring existing businesses on chain by offering censorship resistance and verifiability, and then interop with actual decentralized networks. So for me, I'm like excited to see either way, to be honest. On Union side, it's always been actually easier to integrate L1s, funny enough. L1s kind of, from our perspective, when you need to like generate zero knowledge proofs about the consensus itself, have stronger guarantees overall than L2s. I'm not sure for people who are still interested in bits and really follow it, but a lot of L2s also kind of slowed down a bit in their like roadmap of becoming like fully verifiable. They always kind of remain like single sequencer. Sequencer holds a lot of control. You don't really know what happens during a dispute. Like, it's still fairly untested technology. So I think L1s, at least right now, offer like a really good solution that I still think kind of like outperforms L2s.
I agree. Yeah. And it also bolsters the value proposition of our vision at Primev and your vision at Union. Let's say, in this example where there's a bunch of stable coins that need to be transferred over to another domain, and there's some IP transaction there. You want that to be interoperable. You want that to be having fast economic finality. So I think all of our visions at the end of the day are towards this future where there is going to be n number of dominant blockchains. Some of them might be L1s, L2s, or L3s. And at the end of the day, it should work as a cohesive ecosystem where things can be more verifiable, transparent, and more seamless and somewhat decentralized in different degrees for each domain, right? I think our vision, although it's not explicit, does is parallel in a sense. And we'd love to support more fast economic finality transactions that are taking stable coins from Ethereum, doing something else on another chain, and then maybe bringing some assets back and using something like Union to kind of bridge those over as well. So I do think these are cohesive in the future that we're moving towards.
Yeah, I think it's important not to forget, even though sometimes people will say like economic security is a LARP, of course, that we actually nowadays have like real examples where like economic security is being abused inside protocols. I think we see it with Polymarket and UMA, right? Where there's this whale club that holds a whole bunch of the UMA tokens, which are used to vote on the outcome for every single market, where we have had a couple times that they actually blatantly manipulated and took like a no stance on a certain event, and then the media says yes, it did occur, but then the oracle is manipulated by token holders to actually vote on the no case, and then the whales can basically make a bunch of money and alter the truth. I think in the end the same goes, for example, something like IP, right? Where sure, like there's like one true IP, right? Like the way someone created it, but the moment you do bring it on chain, yes, you make it like way more accessible for everyone. But now all of a sudden you do need economic security to properly make like a statement about the truth of IP. Or does Camp have like a hybrid solution where like you guys have an authority position on the IP, or is it indeed like fully decentralized L1?
Yeah, I was actually formerly the product lead at Polymarket briefly. So this is something I definitely dealt with. The core of the problem is that you need some security for that, at this point, large app, right? And usually that security is provided by, something like Ethereum, for example, where, there's a somewhat large decentralized base and it's somewhat credibly neutral, right? But in the Polymarket case, it's a traditional startup in the sense that it went for product market fit, and it was trying to grow the markets and deliver its core value rather than spend all this time, building maybe a native L1 or a very robust, dispute resolution mechanism that would take away from its growth on the actual markets, right? And now that it has achieved that growth in the market side, it does have the opportunity to go back and fix those areas to make this more robust solution. I do think UMA served very well, in its kind of initial growth phase, but without spilling too much, I do think you can anticipate some moves from Polymarket and doing something in the area of either the chain or some security or some dispute resolution that is more robust. And they're already doing some of this with this Grok integration. If I were still there, I would advise something like a weighted approach between Grok and the community. And likely the community should have its own say rather than relying on another community like UMA. I'm not going to hint at tokens or anything for that, but I do think robust blockchain systems or decentralized systems do leverage some sort of community input that is verifiable, usually either in the proof of work or token related forms to kind of solve this problem, right? And there's also a little bit of responsibility that falls on the market creation aspect, right? Ultimately, it's a very difficult job, and the team there has done a fantastic job because you're only hearing these like outlier cases rather than every market having this situation. But it's very tricky because in the case of this guy Zelensky wearing the suit or not, for example, it's actually a human problem, right? Humans cannot agree whether it's a suit or not. So then how can the market kind of pick one or the other? So it's you have to come up with markets where it's not up to kind of human agreement as much. It's kind of more factual, if that's even a realistic goal. So it's a multifaceted problem, but I do think Polymarket team has been kind of thinking about this from the right angle for a long time, and they do have plans to upgrade this experience. And some of the moves with Grok and the partnership with XAI is already moving towards that. There might be some interesting angle there for James's team as well, where this AI will ultimately have to prove something or show that something's derived from some source of truth, right? So there's definitely a growing opportunity there for this kind of truth machine as well.
Is this, and I know you can spill like the beans and you're not with Polymarket anymore. This maybe like ZK-TLS and like verifiable AI, something that's being looked at here. I feel like there's like when you need like off-chain truth, there's like two ways right now. Indeed, like a committee where there's like a token or some type of like economic finality behind it. In that case, I always think it's better to have your own token, because I feel like if you're relying on some foreign token, then those token holders will technically always, of course, from economic perspective, try to maximize their own bags, which means that if they will make money on it, they will like damage your protocol. That's just, I think, how the free market kind of works, unless there's like a long-term incentive for them to make more money by not doing so. And I feel the other way right now is what we see with like opacity network and like ZK-TLS, and kind of the ability to to first whoever holds the domain, basically, right? Like attach something to whatever MSNBC says on this. But there I feel like still the issue really is that when they do like a news article, Zelensky war suit or whatever, that's not really machine interpretable yet, right? Like that's a text document with an image. So we cannot really convert that yet to provide that to a smart contract. So there still seems to be that missing layer in between for us to have like the one truth machine. I feel like verifiable AI might be the case, where indeed like the market is like, what will ChatGPT say if we provide them like the web page on this at this date, and verifying that output completely. Although I haven't like seen applications for that yet, but that to me at least feels like almost the most elegant solution to solve something like this.
Yeah, and you know, the Polymarket also relies on you know, Polygon, the chain, and you know, UMA as its kind of oracle. So it historically had very tight relationships with these ecosystems, right? So you know, and now it's gotten to a critical point where it's so big that it's kind of outgrown some of these ecosystems, maybe, right? It's ultimately up to those communities and the Polymarket community to carve a path forward. You know, being able to grow without kind of neglecting their long-term partnerships. And you know, I do anticipate seeing more in this area in the coming months. But you know, at the end of the day, like if I were still there or something like that, or if I were to kind of just think about it deeply, I would continue to focus on generating deep liquidity for many markets, which is kind of some of the things that they're doing with the recent announcement of their acquisition and coming back to the US. Because when you have that larger community and larger stakes, things kind of solve themselves at least partially, right? You know, when you have $1 billion on a market, you know, the stakes are much higher to get to the actual truth than, you know, to argue about, you know, some smaller market, right? So and this quite happens in many smaller markets too. Like you have some box office result. Is it going to be over 100 million or not? Well, the results came in from China, and actually, if you count the Chinese time zone, it is, you know, over 100 million. But you know, if you just count this time zone, it's not. So there's like various aspects to having disputes that ultimately could be resolved with, you know, larger liquidity and greater kind of participation in the markets. You know, I think the team's definitely doing the right thing by focusing on that as the first thing, and you know, looking at solutions to kind of improve the other aspects as they move forward and grow. So, but yeah, all of these technologies that, you know, we're building are the underlying infrastructure to make that future more robust, better, you know, less trusted and more kind of trustless, and ultimately scalable on a global level.
Yeah, I think that's just super important to remember. I think a lot of new builders indeed like do something that's AI aligned, because we all know like AI will take a very dominant role, but we're seeing Web3 be used to make products accessible and scalable, right? And now it's, I feel like, up to the Web3 space to show that in the end your product is not going to get manipulated, right? That actually like our promise of it will be secure, it will be trustless, it will be fair, that we actually uphold that, and not that in 3 years we get builders switching back to more centralized solutions and simply stating in the end like we're just running the server ourselves was a much better solution than building an L1. So I think like future will tell if indeed like Web3 is fully ready to take on the masses. Guys, we're at the end of the cast, and I know you two are extremely busy, so thank you so much for taking the time and educating me. James and Murat, like if people want to learn more about your projects, where should they do so, and what more should they do as next steps to become familiar?
Yeah, on Twitter we are Camp Network XYZ, and then at Twitter personally, I'm at James KCHI. I'm always happy to chat all things IP, AI, and anything else, and appreciate you guys having me. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so much. For people listening in, James had to come on last minute. We had a different role change coming in, so very happy that you could come in and teach us so much on a short notice. And we're not happy to speak with you again. What's next for Primev, by the way? Now that you guys are
growing you know, our network coverage on mainnet from 1% to, you know, close to 100%. And you know, we're working with dApps, and we're working with you know, interoperability solutions such as Union, to kind of bring this economic finality across the ecosystem, right? Because dApps can be just as fast as Web 2 now, no matter the blockchain they use, and then we're looking to expand to those blockchains as well. So, if you're a dApp developer, if you're a wallet, if you're just a user of any power user of any dApps, definitely follow us, Primev_XYZ. It's spelled like this on my T-shirt. But the core thing is that we want to bring this technology that is still kind of at the infrastructure level to the dApps, so that masses are just interacting with dApps and they don't care about the speed of the blockchain or anything else underneath. And that's the kind of the big value unlock for the ecosystem. That's, I think in a few years, it's not even going to be Web3 UX, Web2 UX. It's just going to be just one UX that you deal with, and everything is going to be abstracted.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. That's a vision we've shared from the very start. I'm very excited still to be working with you guys, because you solve probably the biggest issue for Union, which is Ethereum slow finality, like the one-stop solution we need to make our product even better. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining in. For our listeners, next week, I think we'll be back again with 2 new speakers. So make sure to join in, and make sure to follow these 2 absolute titans of industry and follow their projects as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.